And here we are. So I think I know everyone here, but I'll just, for the sake of anyone who may be watching later on YouTube, my name is Jake Walker, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Theater Community Fund of Kansas City. And in case you don't know, we're a nonprofit organization whose purpose is to provide support and assistance to Kansas City-based theater workers. We do not discriminate between community and professional. Anyone who is a part of the theater community is welcome to all of our services, which include emergency grants, this free masterclass series, which provides free access to professional mentorship with artists like Michelle Tyreen Johnson, Nathan Darrow, Tosin Morin-Fola, and hopefully many, many more over the next decades and decades. We also have the Crescendo Awards, which ACE is one of the recipients of, which provides funds towards production costs for members of the BIPOC community, which I recently learned it's important to say Black, Indigenous, and people of color, so that people from the Asian community, people from the Indigenous, I have been corrected to say Black and Indigenous people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Cool thing to learn. So today we're here with Michelle Tyreen Johnson, and she's going to give you guys a taste of her experience and knowledge in writing short plays, but have assured me that they can also be translated to longer projects. I also want to welcome my good friend Lisa Lennon, who is ASL interpreting for us today. And now I'm going to share the screen and toss it to Michelle.
Okay, great. This is so wonderful. It's such an honor to do this. Kansas City is home. I'm fourth generation Kansas City, KCK, baby, Jayhawk, grad, you know how I do. Okay. And Casey's always home, even though I currently live and work in Louisville. But one of the reasons I'm super excited about talking about this is I don't look at this so much as me teaching anything, like me doing a master class. I don't really know how to do a master class on anything other than like being late and staying in bed. Like those would be the only two things that I could honestly consider myself a master in. But other than that, one of the things, though, I will say about playwriting for me, and it all started with writing 10-minute plays, is I personally don't think of 10-minute plays as a lesser play than longer plays, but I think that they are a great entryway into having the confidence and learning some skills and just meeting people. And most of you that I'm looking at, people in theater, like you are already in theater. So, but for me, when I started writing, I wrote my first play at the age of 46. So that's the other thing I want to emphasize, because I've been doing it 11 years now. Holla, hi, is that it is writing, unlike a lot of things in life, is something that you can start at any time, any place, like wherever you are. And whoever you are is the time and place to pick up the pen, which of course is a metaphor because we all use laptops. Although seriously, I'm working on a play now and I use note cards and notebooks because it's all about how the mood strikes me. Like I'll be writing in a notebook and then 5 minutes later, I'm on the computer and then back to the card or the notebook. So I'm going to jump right in because this is going to be a working workshop and we don't have a lot of time. So if we could go to the next slide, Jake, my able assistant, Jake. So conception. So conception, an impulse that becomes an idea that initiates a play. And that's a lot of words to say, what do you want to write about? So could you go to the next slide, please? And all my words are C words in terms of how, so, because I find that if you do that, then it keeps you remembering, okay, what is it? So what issues or topics light you up? Okay, that is so important because it can be anything from little or small. Could you go to the next slide, Jake? So what pisses you off? What turns you on? What do you want to see on stage? Who do you want to see on stage? What do you want to respond to in the world? Now I'm going to give you a little thing to do, but before we get to the working part of this, you know, that's really important because how I even got into playwriting is I've been a writer of one sort or another my entire life. And Twitter, of all things, is how I became a playwright. Because I went on Twitter, when I joined Twitter about 12 years ago, I was looking for a place to see if I can see contests or people who wanted to look at my short stories or my novel. And I came across a contest for 10-minute plays written by Black women playwrights. So first of all, I had forgotten about Lorraine Hansberry and Ntozake Shange and immediately went, there are Black women playwrights and there are 10-minute plays? So I took one of my my short stories and I turned it into play. Now, if this was a Hollywood movie, then that 10-minute play that I wrote would have exploded and have been the start of everything. It was crap and it was turned down by the people who I submitted it to in New York City. But I really liked writing a short play, like, and an idea came into my head almost full form of what I wanted to write an original 10-minute play about, because I heard about the contest at the Barn Players 6x10. So I'm like, what the hell would I write about? And the most fully formed idea, I mean, it's weird how it popped into my head, was about a family dealing with Alzheimer's. So if any of you know anything about me, my grandmother was one of the closest people to my heart, and she died about 5 years ago. But at the time that I started writing this play, she was still alive, living in a nursing home. And, you know, I was dealing with the generational impact of Alzheimer's. I was like, how the hell does somebody write about that in a 10-minute play? But the point is that was my idea. Now, if you have followed my trajectory since then, you know what I tend to write about is the thing that most pisses me off in America, racism. Now, are all my plays about racism? No. But is racism a really good thing to tackle for me personally? Yes. But it doesn't have, but that's me. That's what gets me worked up. For some people, like, I won't mention it because, you know, Jake done already warned me this is going up on YouTube. And Lord, you know, I don't want anybody to assume that anything I say is shade, because this is not shade, but other people like to write lighter things. You know, and I've written some lighter things, don't get me wrong. I mean, I got a 10-minute play that involves, you know, a Vulcan and the return of Marilyn Monroe. So it's not that I just write about racism and deep things, but, you know, there are some people, they only want people to laugh, right? Laughter is what they aim for. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's all about what turns you on. So you have a 2-minute assignment. Okay, because you all have pens and paper, right? Or something to scribble with, right? Thank you. Hello. Because if you're a writer, you got to have something. That phone may not always work. Just take just a couple of minutes to write down 3 things or ideas, like nothing fully formed, just what would you get excited about writing? You know, like like if somebody said, to me, Michelle, write a story about, kitty litter. I mean, unless you paid me money up front, that would not inspire me. So, just 3 ideas real quick. I'll shut up so you can do that.
Uh-huh.
All right, 1 more minute. All right. Okay. Who wants to share an idea or two? They wrote down.
I will.
Okay.
Grief and the afterlife of loss, the toxicity in radar dating apps such as Grindr, and corporatism or capitalism in the way that they control us.
Ooh. Child, you got a bevy of plays you can write from any one of those things. Okay, who else? Anybody else? Because don't make me call on you. Okay, just spit it out. I think Gail, I saw your hand.
You did.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have a story called The Chapter Room about my life in a sorority.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I have other stories from my life as a KCK transplant, from my public school experience to Loretto Academy.
Okay.
I have, I'm reuniting with people who should have been my neighbors and friends. Because Michelle and I actually grew up like walking distance from each other.
Yeah, but never met until we were adult theater people. Exactly.
Right.
All right.
Because of KCK segregation.
Yeah. Okay. Did you come up with something? And am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes. Hi, I'm Unju. Nice to meet you.
Unju?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So I think my things are all pandemic related. My themes of grief and also racism, specifically against the AAPI community, and the difference of like cities in New York versus like the Midwest. So basically COVID. And then an idea of what our relationship to I guess industries like Amazon have been like during the pandemic, and how we grow relationships with objects and items and distance from people. So like those contrasting ideas of that spectrum. And then in general, just grief. So those are my 3 ideas, all pandemic related.
Understandable. And by the way, I've been Amazon's bitch big time for the last couple of years. I mean, I was, boy, it's amazing how much better the delivery service is when you live in a white neighborhood than a black neighborhood. But I digress. Anyway, Jerry, you've been quiet. What you got?
Hello. I guess I just turn on my camera. Hello.
Hey, Hey.
Hi. I things that really kind of intrigue me. I really like themes of masculinity versus femininity, and where how we balance those or how we do not balance those. I love coming of age stories, stories of growing up and just being a teenager, and the venture into adulthood. Um, and then my favorite genre is dark comedy, so I love to explore dark comedy genre. And yeah, and then obviously, uh, being a Latino American here in the United States,
Yeah.
and I've had many conversations just between other Latino Americans, and it's crazy how it's not a monolith of experience. It's my experience is very different from other people that I know, and so that's always intriguing, having those conversations and seeing
Excellent.
how that translates to the page.
That's great. Brianna, I didn't forget about you, sister. Come on. What you got?
I wrote something that intrigues me definitely is just the experience of being a fat woman and a tall woman in America, and how that's impacted my life and the life of a lot of other people. That's something that's like very personal to me, but the older I get, the more I find a lot of other people have experienced that as well. And that's something that I see a lot in everyday life, but never really see on stage, except as like a comedic role. Like fat women are always like the comic relief.
Yep.
So that's interesting to me. I'm also been intrigued lately just with the idea of like personal history of where we come from, and my dad in particular. I've talked to you about this before, that I don't really know that side of my family, and in researching that, have found some very interesting things. And then something, and this is kind of a bummer, the environment and climate change and rising tides and what that means for all of us, and are we going to get to live out the rest of our lives or not?
Well, this is exciting. Every single one of you came up with ideas that I can tell are deeply personal, and that, honest to God, has got to be the starting place. There is no reason for you to write about something you don't want to write about unless somebody is paying you to do it. So, and even then, because I've been fortunate enough to get a lot of commissions the last few years, you got to find your passion point even then, so that what you're writing about springs uniquely from your fire. So, okay, Jake, could we go to the next slide? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, where are we? All right. Is that the next slide? There we go. There's the next slide. So this is something that, if you look at some books or some places about playwriting, they put this fairly high up. And while, and this is high up, but I personally think you have to start with your passion point first. But then the next thing is, who would tell your story about your idea? And I put the emphasis on your, because there's no matter what you write about, somebody else writing about the same thing would write it completely differently. You know where I learned this? I learned this teaching creative writing to 7th and 8th graders for almost 4 years at St. Paul's Episcopal Day School on Main Street, where those kids, I loved giving them prompts to write like a short story, and to see how they could come up, like a class of like 15, like the same 3 things, how they would go in different directions. Because everything you write, you bring yourself, and we all have different experiences. So who would tell your story? Is it people, realistic people? Is it historical people, animals, objects, elements, sci-fi characters? two of the best 10-minute plays I personally have ever seen. One, the characters were dogs. It was dogs at the racetrack dogs. And it was a wonderful play, hilarious, but full of some really poignant points. Another 10-minute play that I loved, it was in the Midwest Dramatist Center conference. Hot dogs were the characters. And don't think that I have a dog thing. It just coincidentally, one play was actual dogs, but portrayed by people, and the second was hot dogs, and hot dogs in like a quick trip type place, and how they were very different hot dogs. These hot dogs had very different issues roasting in the quick trip compared to the other things that were going on in the quick trip. And that's the whole thing. One of the things I tell anybody is that people will fall into whatever story you write if you do it well enough, right? It doesn't matter what is on that stage. There is going to be buy-in from somebody in that audience, because people lean toward stories. They lean in. So it doesn't matter who tells your story, as long as there's a point of view to tell, right? So this is your next little 2-minute workshop project. Take one of your ideas. Again, it doesn't have to be a fully formed idea, but just one of those themes you just told me about, and think of two characters who could tell a story about that theme. In fact, part of your 2 minutes, think of names, whether they're, I said hot dogs, whether they're the characters are hamburgers, whether they're cats, whether it's, plants in the garden, whatever. So think of two characters and give them names. And I'm giving you 2 minutes starting now.
Should have had the Jeopardy theme song ready.
I know. Do, 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 do. You're not done yet. You got another minute, but I want to bring some ambiance to the situation. Okay, everybody ready? Anybody need another 30 seconds? All right, I'm gonna go in the order of, by the way, Jake, are you doing this or are you just observing and helping?
Just observing.
Okay, all right. All right, Jerry, I'm gonna start with you. Who are your two characters? What are your two characters' names and what are they?
So my two characters' names are Richard, and I'm thinking later he'll change his name to Rick, and Gary, and they are two roommate friends, video game nerds. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Very specific. I love it. Unju, okay, tell me. I mean, and again, and if I ever am mispronouncing your name, just kick me through the screen. Okay.
That was great. Thank you. So my two characters' names are Zara, because it's a clothing apparel company that my character orders a bunch of clothes from. And the character's name is Erica. So those are the two characters that I have.
Okay. All right. Brianna.
I'm going, I have an older woman and then a young girl. I'm thinking Loretta for the older woman and Jess for the young girl. And they're not related, but their paths intersect.
Okay. All right. Gail.
Well, actually, I have some objects.
Oh, I love it. All right. Two objects. Okay.
A chair,
Okay.
a 1990s station wagon.
All right. Two objects. You only have two characters.
But okay.
So there's two characters. We're gonna stick to just one idea for the duration of this. But hopefully all of this can apply to you doing more than that. But okay, so so your one play has a chair and a you said car?
An older car, yes.
Okay, all right. All right. Cool.
And
Those are
a
your two
window.
characters. Huh?
A window, a
Okay.
view, a view.
Okay. Cool. All right, Ace, what you got?
I've got Ira and Acedia. Ira means wrath and anger, and Acedia means sloth or depression, and they're both supernatural beings.
Ooh, okay. Because what I'm doing with all of this, you all probably can, I'm pretty transparent. We don't have time for you to actually write your plays, but I want to give you all like the tools as part of teaching about this so that you can go concretely write a play, a 10-minute play as soon as this is over. And at the end of this, I'm going to give you my email address so that if you feel like it, you can write me, you can send me your play. So that's my bonus work for the Theater Community Fund of Kansas City. All right, so could we go to the next slide, please, Jake? Okay. It's the next one. There we go, conflict. Not as in fighting, but as in engagement. Another way of putting it, if you're talking about any kind of play, is so what? You guys ever watch something, whether it was a play or any kind of drama, and you were like, are they at any point going to get to the point? Like, what is this about? And in a 10-minute play, unlike longer pieces of work, you have to get to that very quickly. So, Jake, if you could give me the next slide. So what is conflict? A cat climbing a tree and then coming down on its own is not conflict. And I'm not picking on cats. I'm horribly allergic to them, but I'm not picking on cats. I like cats. I just don't like sneezing and having congestion. And especially at this time of COVID, I don't like being around cats because I don't know if that's COVID or cat. So anyway, a cat climbing a tree and 3 neighbors unsuccessfully trying to get the cat down, especially if their measures conflict with one another, that's really good conflict, right? Like if one neighbor is throwing a rock at the cat, throwing rocks at the cat, while the other neighbor is, you know, a PETA person and is like, no, you can't, you might hurt the cat. Oh, you know what I mean? Like that may not be about the cat, but it's about the conflict of the story. And I'm just making this up as I go along. I've never written a play about a cat up a tree, but this just seemed like it would be a good example because you can apply it to anything. So could we go to the next slide, Jake? So, and I think I'm going to give you more than 2 minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes for this. So you've come up with 2 characters. You've come up with a general idea or a backdrop of an idea. What conflict would could those two characters have? And again, I'm not talking fight or argument, but what is it that those two could be in conflict about? You know, to use my very first 10-minute play that I was telling you about Alzheimer's, you know, you might go, well, what kind of conflict could a family have about Alzheimer's? Mm-hmm. Well, the conflict in that play, and I wrote the play before I even knew what the hell conflict was. So, you know, was, you know, a daughter wanting to keep her mother at home who had dementia, while her husband is saying, but it's not the safe thing for your mother or our family. And so they're in conflict. And so things happen to sort of push against what's the best way to handle that. So that's an example of conflict from a play of mine. So your 3 minutes for you all to just think of a conflict. You don't even have to have one idea. If you want to have a couple of ideas, that's fine. But think of 1 or 2 ideas that your 2 characters could be pushing up against one another on, because one of them has an objective and the other's trying to stop it, or one of them has an objective and the other one doesn't know quite how to support it. So, all right, it's 1:42 here, so I'll hit you back up in 3 minutes. One more minute. All right, all right. Is everybody ready? Okay. Playing a little bit of music in the background because my neighbors are doing something downstairs. Don't ask me what. Okay, Gail, what conflict do your chair and old car have?
Money,
Ooh,
deception, betrayal, murder attempts.
damn.
Enough.
Wait,
Should I keep
wait.
going?
I'm just like, okay, well, we'll get to another aspect of all of that in a later in a later part of this workshop. Okay.
Revelation, alcoholism.
Oh, wow.
Remember, this is a 10-minute play, which again, we'll get back to that later. Who wants to go next? Just jump in.
My two characters are arguing about whether or not to reveal a secret. One of them thinks things are better left as they are. One of them thinks the truth needs to come out.
Okay. That's always a really, I won't say easy conflict to write, but it
Okay.
gives you something very concrete to write, especially in a 10-minute play. Okay, next, who else wants to jump in?
I'll go. So I'm switching because I'm writing a 10-minute play right now. So I'm switching from a different play that I'm writing to this one. And my two characters are Humira and Grunder. They're also supernatural beings. And Humira is the goddess of the gays and big pharma. And Grunder is the demon of Grinder. And they want two different outcomes from two individuals that randomly meet and pick up conversation in the gay bar while they are both checking their grinders at the same time.
Well, now, sounds like somebody got himself a framework for a 10-minute story. I'm already intrigued. What is it? The goddess of gays and what?
And big pharma.
And big pharma. Okay, now. All right. Okay, Ace. Okay. All right. Who's next? Who's gonna jump into this fray?
So, you know, I kind of went with I listed a couple different things that, could come up with two video game geeks. And I have like an overall kind of idea that kind of hangs over these two characters as far as the theme goes, but, how, there's got to be one roommate or one video game player that's gonna always be better than the other one, and then how that translates to the roommate dynamics and the power struggle sometimes with that, while also translating to using video games as a scapegoat a lot of the times. Like, you can be really good at video games, but maybe sometimes in life things aren't always going so well, like the two different worlds of those things. So there's just like a whole crock pot of ingredients for these two characters, for these two roommates.
That sounds good. I had an ex-boyfriend who once said that a man who plays video games is a man who's probably not cheating on you.
Right.
And he was right, but this particular man who plays video games also probably was not going to work. But again, I digress. We're on YouTube. Anju, what about you? What's going on? What are your characters got going on?
So my character, so Erica is the actual person, and I guess the setup is that she starts buying these clothings during the pandemic to find some stress relief. And since she hasn't seen people in months, she starts talking to the clothing, and they take on a life of their own. And it seems like building a community to cope with this separation from people, until she gets laid off of her job and then sees her credit card statement and has to what she can live without.
Yeah. been there, done that.
Okay.
Okay, that's a promising start. Cool, cool, cool. You all have come up with, see how with each step you kind of dig down a little bit, and it gives you something. It's the Play-Doh of forming a play, where when you haven't written anything and haven't thought of anything, it seems impossible. Even a 10-minute play seems impossible. But as soon as you just make even one decision, then it all kind of follows, which then gets to the next slide. Dear Jake, if you could give that to us, construction. So I thought the reason I have a boat being constructed is because, when people hear the word playwright, who don't know anything about theater, they think that playwright is about the writing part, but playwright is spelled PLAYWRIGHT, because it's about building, not about writing. It's about building. You are writing, but you're building, you're constructing something, and you're constructing something that is meant for a particular purpose and place and time. So the construction is the structure of how you begin and how you push the story forward. Because again, back to the cat in the tree. I mean, you could just have 10 minutes of the cat in a tree. What construction is that? I mean, even if you show the cat going, even if you have the cat played by the phenomenal actor Jake Walker. Jake Walker, is great an actor as he is, him in a cat suit climbing up a tree and him just sitting up in a tree for 10 minutes. Sorry, y'all, that ain't interesting. I mean, if anybody could make it interesting, it might be Jake, but it ain't interesting. I'm just saying, okay? I'm just like, I'd watch that though.
Yeah,
I would
totally would though.
I would say that. Let me not lie. I probably would watch it too, but I'm just saying it's not the best constructed play ever written. So then on to the next slide, please. So what are different ways to construct the story? I mean, I'm getting my MFA in playwriting. I mean, I'm doing this, and there are times when I'm like, why the hell am I spending money to learn things that I've accidentally learned on my own anyway? But that's a whole nother story. And so I could get into the Aristotelian, talk of, play construction, but I am a KCK girl from the hood, and we just keep this shit simple. So, it boils down to how are you going to tell the story, especially again, 10 minutes. You're going to do it beginning, middle, end. That's perfectly fine. You can do end, middle, beginning. You can do the middle or and the end. You can do it sketch or skit type, which is something that is a way to look at it if you are writing something of a more comedic nature. Or in some of the best plays I've seen, and even shorter than 10 minutes, a moment in time with the point. I mean, there's always a different way to tell a story. I mean, especially when I first started plays, I'd be the first to say, if you've had no experience with playwriting and are trying to just sort of build your muscle, I might just be very straightforward and do beginning, middle, and end. But if you are someone like, there's several of you are actors, so you've seen and been in enough work where if you feel comfortable doing it another way, that's fine. But the point is that in writing your 10-minute play, you have to just commit to a construction. I mean, commitment is sort of the alternate word to construction. Whatever you decide, you just have to decide. So next slide, please, dear Jake.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Ace, please do.
When you say sketch or skit, what is the difference between that and like middle and end, or what do you mean by sketch or skit?
So here's what I mean by that. Do you ever watch Saturday Night Live? Or
Yes.
are you that generation that just hates it and never watches it?
No, I love Saturday Night Live.
Okay, cool. So that is a great example of how a lot of times they can have some brilliant sketches and skits, but they're not really telling a story. You know, like it's a laugh that they've spun out or a character that they've spun out for 5 minutes. And you know, and every blue moon, one of their sketches or skits has a whole story. Because if you think of everything I'm saying as storytelling, right? Like everything is about storytelling. Like that's your bottom line. Did I tell a story? A lot of times with the sketch or a skit, it's not storytelling. It's just showing you characters in a funny situation. Does that distinction make a difference?
Yes, thank you.
And on that, and I'm glad you asked that question, because don't laugh. Two of the best places that have actual storytelling are songs and a good commercial. Like a good commercial can take you someplace, right? Like it can tell a story in under a minute. You may not even remember what the hell they're selling, but they have told a story that makes you just pause, think, refigure something. And then if you go buy the car anyway, too, then, you know, the marketers are like win-win. So in your 2 minutes, I'm going to give you, think of what is a possible, yeah, now Google, man, there's some commercials. Look, I'll cry in a minute on a commercial. Woo, Lord. But think of how you're going to tell your story. You don't have to fully commit, but just think to yourself based on what you've told me so far, your idea and your characters. Tell me in your theme, what do you think is a construction that lends itself to telling an interesting story? So 2 minutes starting. Okay, so before we jump back into me hearing your ideas a little bit, one of the things I wanted to say that I probably didn't say is part of the, oops, I almost did something that was been bad, is that part of coming up with the construction for your play is making the decision of how are you going to get into your play? Like, how does your 10-minute play start? And while I've done it both ways, right? Where I've come up with the beginning of how I want what's the thing I want to start with? What's the image or the feeling I want to start with? And then I come up with the construction. As I've become a more experienced and better playwright, I realize that I have to think of the construction first, or another way of putting it, the framing of how I want to tell the story first, because it becomes real easy to start strong and to have your story just kind of sort of get real unfocused and unwieldy. Even a 10-minute play, in ways, you guys have all seen it. You've all been to a 10-minute play festival, right? Where you're like, where's that going? What the hell just happened? What? You know what I mean? And it doesn't really matter what you decide, as long as you're deciding and not defaulting into something fuzzy. So what are some of the constructions that you all have come up with for how you think you might want to tell your story?
So I'm afraid that this is kind of cliche, but I'm really intrigued by the idea of doing end, middle, beginning. I like the kind of reversed or non-linear of like, here's what happens, here's the end, here's the result, and now let's kind of pull back and see how we got there. That
Yeah. Now, I don't think it's cliche, and nothing, here's the thing about good storytelling. Nothing is cliche if it works.
Right.
There are things where you go, and then you go,
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
Exactly. Okay, somebody else.
So the gods are like the angel and demon on their shoulder. And so they give commentary as the scene goes on. And so it would be a beginning, middle, and end, with the gods entering, meeting each other for the first time, well, knowing each other and figuring out that they're there on the date and together, and they're upset about it. And then they become the angel and devil on the shoulders. And then you figure out which one wins in the end.
Okay. So you definitely, Ace, have come up in your mind with a perspective that lends itself to telling the story in a certain order versus another order. That's good. That's what all I'm talking about. It doesn't matter what you pick, just run with it. That sounds great. Okay. Which one of you? I think there's a couple of you, Jerry, Unjun. Which one of you? Both of you, to say something. Throw me out something.
So I think I also had this idea of at first of flipping it backwards to end, middle, beginning, but the more I thought about it, I think that the standard sort of beginning, middle, and end works better for my story, because we really see the evolution of the relationship of the characters and where it starts off versus where it gets. And my idea actually started off with a more of a full length play idea. So I'm challenging myself to make sure to keep it within that 10-minute or aspect. But in many ways, I'm kind of thinking, because originally I wanted in a full length sort of thing where there's kind of time jumps in this thing. So again, the evolution, but that the 10-minute play would just be essentially the first time jump, or the first part of it. But yeah, I think kind of going with the beginning, middle, and end is stronger, so that we see the evolution of the characters and what the roommate sort of conflict does, along with kind of the video game culture and stuff.
Excellent. And also you remember that while 10 minutes may seem like a really short period of time when you're comparing it to going to see a full-length play or even an hour play, when trust me, when you're writing a 10-minute play, that though because a 10-minute play is approximately 1 page per minute. That's I mean that's all playwriting, right? So if you're talking a 10-minute play, not counting your cover page or your characters and setting, then it's 10 minutes of play, and you may think that that's nothing until you start writing it and you are focused on making this a compelling, coherent story. So, okay. And Jim, before we move on, what about you? Did you come up with the construction?
Yes. At first I was going to do beginning, middle, and end, but then given the the setting of the play, which is, during the pandemic, I decided to do middle, end, and
Okay.
being in the middle, starting there because it's just messy. I kind of picture like as a set, like just like 10-foot high Amazon piles of boxes and things like that. Just like this idea of almost a cocoon that this person has built during the pandemic. So I kind of feel like it's appropriate to start in the middle where it's kind of messy, but then starting with something that I think we are all familiar with, like where
Yeah.
Erica, the main character, is just unboxing another box. And what did
That's excellent. That's an excellent place to start. And if I was home in Kansas City, I'd have plenty of boxes to give you to help with your set. Alas, but you know what? I can give you my mother's number. She got boxes. Okay. Uh, and okay, so then before we move on to the other 10 that I wanted to discuss, can we go to the next slide, Jake? So when we talk about where a 10-minute play starts that we just talked about, we also got to look at this. Can you all, I don't know if you can see this. This is actually a photograph I took when I moved to Louisville, Kentucky in the middle of the pandemic. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm a radio producer for Louisville's NPR member station. And my job as a radio producer, honestly, is not involved gathering news, but I volunteered to go do some stuff when there was just a lot. You can imagine, because Louisville is where Breonna Taylor lived and died. So as you can imagine, our protest was intense. So if you look at this photo, and I don't know if you can read what it says, but that, first of all, that's Jefferson Square. So Louisville is in Jefferson County. So that's Jefferson Square. And that is a picture of what protesters have messed up. You see, they painted Jefferson's hands black, and the words say, no life matters until Black Lives Matter. And what I loved about seeing this was, you've got a family who's out and about, and the little boy is just fascinated. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, man, how do these white parents, what do they do with this when they get home or to the hotel room because they're visiting, in ways that, because the kid, like I just see the openness of this kid, right? Like he doesn't have an opinion on any of this yet. And I think about how often that's how I like my plays to end. That's the feeling I like to leave people with, the possibilities of, even in the most horrific of circumstances, what can we learn from this? What can another person or outsider or another generation learn from something? And most good photographs do that, right? Most good photographs, especially, again, I come from a journalism background. Good photojournalism leaves you with a story. You've all heard of the, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, a 10-minute play can be like a picture if you know how you want it to land. Like my best experiences as a playwright, not just with 10-minute plays, but with all my plays, is when I hear people talking and they don't know who I am, or I can hear it from a distance, even if, I'm talking with friends and they're talking about my play in a way where it's like, yes, it landed the way I wanted it to land, right? My favorite things to hear about my plays aren't merely, oh, that was good. Oh my God, that was so good. Oh my God. But when someone later tells me, me and my husband, me and my wife, me and my partner, me and my whatever, we talked about that play the entire ride home. You know, we're still talking about it. Like, that's the compliment that even a 10-minute play can do if you have anticipated how you want it to land, whether that's an image, whether that's the last line of a character, whether that's a decision, or whether that's the decision that isn't made that you almost, when you're watching it, you know happens the minute after the play ends, if that makes sense. Like, oh, whoa. So that's why I had that. So if we can go to the next slide. This is going so fast. Oh my God, I'm loving this, but it's going so fast. Next slide, please, Jake. And I hope you guys are getting something from this instead of me just running my mouth. And then, I'm sorry, then the slide after that. We've already talked about that. Okay, containment. So this is one of the best friends to a playwright, especially in a 10-minute play. And this is kind of what I was getting at a little bit, Gail, when I said, you know, you have to think about what your limits are in a way that you don't do with the longer play. So how limits of space, time, and money can be your friend and inspiration. So, you know, for those of you who get really into playwriting and you want to have a play in Kansas City Fringe, which is the place where I started doing plays once they got longer, great experience, right? So you're self-producing. And the beauty of self-producing a play is that self means your ass is paying for it, okay? So you paying for what's happening. So that's why if you've ever been involved in 10-minute plays of anything, I mean, Ace and Brianna have worked with me on stuff. It's okay. What clothes you got in your closet for this character? Because I ain't got no money to buy you an outfit, right? You know, what objects can you get? One of my best friends and favorite collaborators in life is Teresa Lagarde, who is a wonderful writer in her own right, but she has really gotten her stones in being a theater director right now. And some of the best and most fun times we have had in life is prop shopping, right? You know, like, we need something for the play and it's got to be cheap because I ain't got that kind of money. All right. So, but containment can be your friend. So, like, if in a 10-minute play, you can, and I've been a judge in a whole lot of plays. I've been a judge, and you can tell, especially no ageism and disrespect for younger playwrights, but you can tell that a lot of folks writing a 10-minute play have only watched movies, only watched TV shows, right? Because in a movie, somebody can be here, like, you know, and then, you know, be in another city, another state, like Kildare and shit, you know, but that's not what you can do on a play. I mean, one of the things I'm still learning is remembering in writing a play, and I'm talking, you know, full-length plays. I just have this character who is one of my plays is the Green Book Wine Club Train Trip, which is a full-length play that takes place in contemporary times in the 1940s. And 5 Black women, 1 woman who time travels between contemporary times in the 1940s. The 4 other characters play one set of characters in contemporary times and another set of characters in the 1940s. Well, honey, they're not magicians. This ain't film. I can't have them go from one scene to, you know, on a train in contemporary time and then whoop, like voila, they're in 1940s attire. I gotta write something in between that allows the actors time to go change their clothes real quick. Well, in a 10-minute play, you rarely have time to do that, right? Like you have to think in terms of economy. I'm not even talking money economy. I'm talking the time economy. Like in my first play, I mean, where the Alzheimer's play, it takes place over time. Well, I had to make sure that to depict time, the costume changes were simple, like putting on a black jacket to denote that the character had died. You know, like they all had to put on black, but they had to be quick, but not full set, you know, veil, all, you know, you see what I'm saying? So that's one of the things you have to think about when you're writing a 10-minute play. If I had to produce this bitch tomorrow, what would it entail? You know, what do I have in my home? What can I afford to buy? What can take place on stage? Like, for example, Gail, in your situation, if there's somebody who's representative of a car, that's cool. You got to figure out, well, how do I make a character a car?
Yeah, no, you can't we put a car on stage. That was
Right.
a lot of fun.
You know what I mean? Like, but
Not a 10-minute play.
but here's the thing: you can make everything representative, right? Like
Right.
a squirrel. You could have a squirrel as a character. Somebody just has to put a tail on its ass, right? Like, you know, you can, you know, the hot dog characters. I mean, you know, they weren't wearing. It was a 10-minute play in a festival conference. I mean,
Right. It would have
it
to
wasn't
be,
like they put on, you know, hot dog skin suits. That would have been kind of gross. But
it would have to be a backdrop photograph.
right, a backdrop, or you have the characters say things where then people, because people again will buy anything as long as you do it right. Like if I'm on stage and tell you I'm a hot dog, for the next 10 minutes, I'm a fucking hot dog. Okay. And then because of the magic of theater, that same actor is in a skit, you know, 2 plays later, and they are a landlord. You know, people buy the magic. So we're getting close to the end. So rather than take you, can we go to the next slide? Rather than, well, let's go, this goes back to explaining limits. Length of time. So you got to think of 10 minutes. Changes in time. You got to think, how can I denote change of time? Sometimes literally all it is changing a jacket, taking a hat off, putting a hat on. I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate. And the beauty of most 10-minute play festivals is that they're low budget, low, what's the word I'm looking for, Jake? It's not like a full production.
Low production values.
Yes, that's the phrase. See, this is okay, y'all. I need to get back into the rehearsal room. Low production values. Like people come expecting low production values. They expect good storytelling, but low production values. To the point where my first few 10-minute plays, when my mother came, she was like, oh, okay, that's supposed to be, you know, because my mother's not a theater person. And then when I started having like, you know, big productions that somebody else paid for, it's like, she was like super impressed. Like, whoa, okay. You know, you've got to think about the space of a stage even. You can always use a stage, right? Like your stage is literally your ability to go, you know, you can figure out how to divide a stage. So when this person is on this side of the stage, and I'm thinking of a play I'm writing now, they are in Africa. When we establish in the construct of the play, when they move over there, they're in Amsterdam. Then somebody takes off a jacket, we are in Memphis, right? It's all about, you've got to take your limits and use them to your advantage, you know? And so one of the things, if we can go to the next slide, rather than have you take 2 minutes to go do this, think about your scenes. Like, you can do this after we're done. but think about the play you all have spent time telling me about, and think to yourself, it's a fun exercise. What are two things in your home right now that you can use for the play you have shared with the rest of us, right? Like Gail, it may actually be a chair, like one of your favorite chairs that you don't mind, dragging to a theater might be the chair you use. If one of Ace, you said that your characters are like gods, right? It may be that there is what in your apartment is something that denotes, a god. I don't know what that would be. I don't know, if you've got a niece or a nephew who left a crown or something over at your house. There's always something. And Dollar Tree, Dollar Tree, Dollar Tree, Dollar Tree. You can go to Dollar Tree and you can find crazy objects that will help you with what you're representing on stage. How many times, it's in some ways, to me, this is the most like fun part. Like, how do you make less more? Is brainstorming. I've borrowed Afro wigs from people because I don't have an Afro wig. Ironically, I now have an Afro, but I borrowed Afro wigs. I have dragged lamps to a stage. The number of objects, to the point, I know, again, I'm not going to talk about nobody.
Come on.
But
Come on.
there's a certain theater company in Kansas
What
City.
happens here stays here. What? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, except for when it goes on YouTube. There's a certain theater company that has a couch in the back because the person who loaned the couch to the playwright for a play just said after the play was over, F it. I don't really feel like coming back to get that couch, and I don't really need it anyway. So that is what happens with trying to create a world. Is just remember, you can do a lot with the little, and sometimes you might prefer doing a lot with the little, or else you better have somebody that has a big truck. So then on to the next slide. This is the last thing I want to talk about, and it is trust yourself, trust your ideas, trust your tribe. And what I mean by that is, I am famous for telling people this. I am not the world's best playwright. I am not Kansas City's best playwright. The only best playwright I am the best playwright in this apartment right now. Okay. All right. I am the GOAT up in this apartment at playwrights. Okay. But at the end of the day, what makes me a good playwright is that I write plays. I write plays, and then I write another play, and then another play, and then another play. And all of the plays teach me something about writing plays. And you know what you can't edit? A blank page. I know people who are like, well, I have these ideas. An idea ain't shit if you have not then put it on a page and then started writing. A bad idea on page is a great idea in terms of what you can do with it. A great idea that's only in your head ain't nothing but, and I would say something about delusional Trump supporters, but that would be inappropriate since I'm a journalist who has no political biases, and everyone knows that I have no political biases.
We do.
So you just have to know that whatever you are writing is something that can be worked on, revised, and rewritten. And you know the other thing I love about writing? You know the other thing I love about writing, which is part of the confidence, is that you don't have to explain shit to anybody. You don't have to show it to anybody. But whatever you show to people, which I think you should, I think that you should share your writing. I think if you look, can we go to the next slide, Jake? Because part of the ways you show confidence is by letting other writers read your work, submitting your work to local festivals, submitting your work to national festivals, join a writing group, start a writing group, you know, and then take advantage of COVID. You all don't have to have, you know, motherfuckers crowded up into your house right now. You can do a Zoom writing festival, okay? All right, nobody has to wear a mask that way, you know? And then the most important 3 tips on how you develop confidence as a writer is you write. Then you write some more. And then you keep writing. And just know whatever you're doing is enough. You know, what I love about being a playwright, and I want to pass this on. I mean, I don't know where any of you all are, any of your work. What I love about being a playwright is in the course of any given week, there are a dozen things that I don't do well, or that my head is barely above water, right? Like my job as a producer, I am constantly having to keep several balls in the air and praying that when something drops, because something will drop, that it will just be something that I can, you know, sweep up quickly and replace. But when you're writing a play, it is literally the most solitary, powerful thing you can do, because when you write your play, your draft of a play, nobody's there. I mean, if you got a husband or a wife or whatever, you know, tell Emerson, for example, if Emerson tries to look over your shoulder, like, get out of here, boy.
Get out of here.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
In the process of writing, you don't have to be anything but you. Whatever you write is yours. And whatever you want to abandon writing so you can write something else, you do that. I mean, that's the most important thing I can tell you. Like all the other things, there's just stuff, tips, tricks, you know, access points. But the most important thing is, you know, I am a great writer compared to the people who I met 11 years ago who talked about writing, who I still ain't seen shit they've written. I mean, honestly, that literally is the only difference. You know, your brilliance comes from just you brilliantly trying. You don't have to get an award at the end of it. You don't even have to get a production at the end of it, but do it. And you know what, though, what'll happen is it will surprise you how many people, what you write, it will resonate with. Anything, we only got a couple more minutes, few minutes, questions, thoughts, FUs, anything?
Oh,
Yes, this is a picture of me and my grandmother.
baby Michelle.
Huh?
Is this
That's
baby
right.
Michelle?
It's baby Michelle when I graduated from Head Start, the first of many graduations, that being the cheapest one. I got another graduation in May. I'm like, what the hell? Anyway, and Cliffy, that's my grandmother. That was my grandmother's name. Was always and still is my biggest inspiration because, you know, I like to write stories that bring the love and the spirit of who she was in my heart and my world into the rest of the world. Like, you know, I didn't have kids. So for me, my plays are my babies. I know that sounds really corny, especially for those of you who actually have kids. But the point is that you are in your own unique position to write whatever moves you, and however you write it, it's yours to write. So here's my email, and I expect every single one of you to write a 10-minute play based on what we went through today, based on how the tools you started with, and I want you to send it to me. And I promise you, I will read it and write you back. I promise. Any questions, thoughts, anything?
Well,
I hope
first,
this was helpful.
it was very helpful. First, I'm interested in the writing of everybody that's in this room, because I think everybody brought really great,
Yeah.
interesting stories. Is there any way that we can maybe speak on Facebook? Like, what is your name on Facebook? And we can message each other, anything like that. Like, if you're willing, I would absolutely love to meet and talk with you all.
I love that.
Sure.
Do we want to like pop them in the chat, or is everybody on Facebook?
I
I
am.
can send a mass email to everyone.
Oh, let's
That'd be
do
great.
that. That's easier.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. I'd love that.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to show this off because one of the things you also have to do as a writer is you have to find inspiration. You have to create inspiration. That's more accurate. You can't wait for inspiration to find you. You have to create inspiration. Like, let me see if I can turn my camera around. I may have to just do this the old fashioned way. I had to create like I said, my writing retreat. So this is what I came up with.
Nice.
You know, because that's the whole thing. You have to just make yourself do it. And again, don't worry about if it's good or not. Done in first draft is better than good. And you know, I tell people this all the time. My best background for being a playwright was being a newspaper reporter. Because you know what you're never going to hear a newspaper reporter say, unless they want to be a fired newspaper reporter? Oh my God, I'm blocked. I can't write that story on deadline. I cannot believe that you expect me to have this news story on deadline. Hell to the no. Whatever needs to be done when it needs to be done, period. You actors can relate to this. As actors, you don't get to go, well, I don't have any inspiration for learning my lines accurately. Your inspiration.
Unemployed
right.
actor.
Right, exactly. So that's the whole thing. Just know you are your own inspiration, and you have to create your own muse. I mean, my muse has expensive ass taste. So I have to tell my muse, I can afford those $12 flowers to write this weekend. I can't afford that $80 bouquet that your bitch ass wanted. That's not going to happen. So that's all I have to say. So I will shut up now. I am done. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I'll just a really quick wrap up. Thank you to Lisa for your wonderful interpretation.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you to everyone who attended. Just a reminder, so we do these workshops because we at TCF believe that economics and finances should not be a barrier to furthering your education, to developing more career-based skills like playwriting and to networking. And often workshops like this cost. I know Kevin Wilmont did a workshop like this over last summer at KU, and it was $300 per seat. And that ends up excluding a lot of people. I can't afford that.
But y'all can at least Venmo me $300. I'm totally kidding.
Well, on that, and thanks to our amazing donors, you know, another thing that's important to us is paying artists for their work.
Yeah.
So we pay our teachers a competitive rate for their work. And then again, thanks to the donors, we then provide that for free to you because not only because we believe in that, it doesn't have to be a barrier, but we believe in you, in the artists of Kansas City. And we want to welcome more people to the table. We want there to be more playwrights. and more diversity on stage, backstage, behind the table, in the lobby, in the box office, in every corner of our community.
It totally matters. That you could look, when I first started doing this at 46 and I got my first email saying that 6x10 was going to do my play, and a lot of local festivals, you don't get paid, it's free. You couldn't have told me on that day that my 57-year-old Black ass would be getting paid to do my plays, and not a little bit of money. I mean, like some of my checks, I'm like, I totally love doing that. And I got paid what? You know, and I don't do it for the money. What I love about writing is it's the one thing in my life I do where I would do it for free, but I ain't doing it for free. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. Oh, and if you're comfortable and wish to give a little bit back, it will go a long way for anyone to make a little post shouting out to Michelle and tagging the Theater Community Fund on your social media. That would be incredibly helpful.
I would love that too.
Yeah, and if
I did it this morning, Jake. You saw it. I went, oh,
yes. And maybe I could get everyone to kind of just give a pretty face, and I'll take a little picture. Is that okay with everyone?
Ooh.
Hang on. Yeah, right. There we go.
Okay. Phone is there. I'm gonna look. Hey, we're pretty.
we are.
Great. Well, be safe today. It's the roads are crazy, and
be very safe, please.
Jerry, I'll see you in a few hours. Jerry, just a quick shout out. Jerry missed some rehearsals for The Pests, several rehearsals due to some stuff, and then popped in an hour of rehearsal and then performed for an audience this week.
Oh,
Bravo.
Oh my God.
yes.
Amazing.
Jerry.
Really amazing.
Well, you all stay safe, because like I said, KC is my home. I just physically live someplace else right now, but thank you for bringing me home.
Well, we miss you.
Thank you.
We do.
All
Love you
right.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm gonna
Bye-bye.
end
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Have a great
Michelle.
day.
It's good to see
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.